What if I told you that the Sahara Desert was once green, filled with rivers, elephants, hippos, and entire human communities thriving, where today there is only endless sand? What if the story of Algeria did not begin with kingdoms, empires, or revolutions, but with some of the earliest humans who ever walked the earth? Long before borders existed, long before languages were formed, and long before history was written, Algeria was already a crossroads of humanity. To understand the true origins of this land, we must travel back not hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of thousands of years into the deep prehistoric past. Archaeological discoveries across Algeria reveal that early human ancestors lived in this region during the Lower Paleolithic period. Stone tools discovered at sites such as Ain Hanek near Sétif suggest human activity dating back possibly more than 1 million years. These tools, simple but purposeful, were crafted by early human species such as Homo erectus. They used sharpened stones to cut meat, break bones, and shape wood. Life was harsh and unpredictable, yet even in these early stages, humans were learning to adapt to their environment. Algeria at that time did not resemble the dry landscapes we see today. Instead, climate cycles transformed North Africa repeatedly. During humid periods, vast grasslands covered what is now desert, rivers flowed across plains, freshwater lakes formed, and wildlife flourished. Elephants, rhinoceroses, giraffes, and antelopes roamed freely. This was not an empty land. It was vibrant and alive, and early humans were part of that ecosystem. The Sahara itself has undergone dramatic transformations over tens of thousands of years. Due to long-term changes in Earth's orbit and shifts in climate patterns, North Africa alternated between wet and dry eras. During what scientists call the Green Sahara periods, rainfall increased dramatically, turning the region into fertile savanna. In these times, human communities expanded and settled across areas that are now barren. When arid conditions returned, populations migrated north toward the Mediterranean coast or south toward sub-Saharan regions. Algeria became a natural bridge between Africa, the Mediterranean world, and eventually Europe. These cycles of movement shaped the deep foundations of North African identity. Around 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens began spreading across Africa. Evidence from North Africa shows that modern humans gradually established themselves in this region. Stone tools from the Middle Paleolithic period found in Algeria reveal increasing sophistication. Carefully shaped points and blades indicate advanced hunting strategies and social cooperation. Humans were no longer merely reacting to their environment. They were planning, organizing, and passing knowledge from one generation to the next. Algeria was not isolated from the broader human story. It was connected to early migration routes that may have linked Africa to Europe during favorable climate windows. The land that would one day become Algeria was already part of humanity's great journey. One of the most important prehistoric cultures associated with North Africa is the Algerian culture, which emerged roughly 150,000 years ago. The Algerians are known for distinctive stone tools with tangs, allowing them to attach spear points securely to wooden shafts. This innovation suggests not only technical skill, but strategic thinking. Archaeological findings across the wider Maghreb region show evidence of shell beads and ornaments linked to this period, indicating early symbolic behavior. Personal decoration suggests identity, communication, and possibly spiritual belief. These developments mark a crucial step in human cultural evolution. Algeria stood within this cultural sphere, contributing to the slow and remarkable emergence of symbolic thought. As the last ice age ended roughly 10,000 years ago, climate conditions shifted again. The Sahara entered another humid phase, and human communities began transforming their way of life. This period marked the Neolithic revolution in North Africa, when groups gradually transitioned from purely hunting and gathering to herding domesticated animals such as cattle. In parts of southern Algeria, especially in the Tassili Najjar plateau, rock art vividly illustrates scenes of pastoral life. Thousands of paintings and engravings depict cattle herders, ceremonial gatherings, wildlife, and daily activities. Some of these artworks date back more than 8 to 10,000 years. They provide powerful visual evidence that the Sahara once supported complex communities. The paintings show human figures with distinct styles and forms, sometimes with exaggerated features, sometimes engaged in rituals. These images are not random decorations. They are stories carved into stone. They reveal belief systems, social organization, and cultural expression long before written language existed. Tassili Najjar is often described as an open-air museum of prehistoric art. The sandstone formations preserve thousands of images across different periods, reflecting environmental change. Early paintings show wildlife typical of wet climates, while later images reveal the gradual disappearance of certain animals as the land became drier. Through these artistic records, we can trace the transformation of the Sahara from fertile savanna to expanding desert. The art demonstrates that prehistoric communities observed their environment closely and recorded those changes visually. They were not passive survivors. They were thinkers, artists, and storytellers. Around 5,000 to 4,000 years ago, arid conditions intensified once more. Lakes dried up, vegetation receded, and sand gradually dominated the landscape. Communities that had thrived during humid periods were forced to migrate. Many moved toward the Mediterranean coast, where the climate remained more stable and agriculture became increasingly viable. Others moved southward into the Sahel. These migrations contributed to the formation of early North African ethnic and cultural identities. The deep ancestral roots of the Amazigh, also known as Berber peoples, extend back into these prehistoric populations shaped by movement, adaptation, and resilience. By the time written records from external civilizations began mentioning North Africa, the land that is now Algeria had already experienced hundreds of thousands of years of human presence. Its people had survived dramatic climate shifts, developed increasingly sophisticated tools, expressed themselves through art, and established pastoral communities. The story of Algeria did not begin with conquest or empire. It began with survival and adaptation. It began with the first stone tools, shaped by ancient hands. It began with rivers that no longer flow, and animals that no longer roam those lands. It began with human beings learning how to endure. This prehistoric foundation is not simply background history. It is the bedrock upon which all later Algerian identity was built. From shifting deserts to enduring art carved in stone, the earliest chapters of Algeria's story remind us that before kingdoms rose and borders were drawn, there was land, climate, and humanity itself shaping the future. And as climate stabilized along the Mediterranean coast and tribal societies began forming structured communities, a new chapter in Algeria's story was about to unfold. One that would bring organized tribes, powerful leaders, and the first great North African kingdoms into history. As the prehistoric age gave way to more stable climates along the Mediterranean coast, human communities in what is now Algeria began forming stronger tribal identities, laying the foundation for organized societies that would eventually become powerful kingdoms. The land that had once been shaped primarily by climate and migration was now shaped by emerging leadership, alliances, and conflict. By the first millennium BCE, the people of North Africa were no longer simply pastoral communities scattered across plains and mountains. They were tribes with territories, warriors with loyalties, and leaders with growing political ambition. The earliest historically recognizable inhabitants of Algeria were the Amazigh, often referred to by the ancient Greeks and Romans as the Berbers. The term Amazigh means free people, and it reflects a deep-rooted cultural emphasis on independence and tribal autonomy. These communities were not a single unified nation, but a network of tribes spread across North Africa, from the Atlantic Ocean to western Egypt. In Algeria, major tribal confederations emerged across the fertile coastal plains, the Atlas Mountains, and the high plateaus. They spoke related languages belonging to the Afro-Asiatic family, and they developed social systems centered around kinship, clan leadership, and warrior traditions. While these tribes had existed for centuries, it was contact with Mediterranean civilizations that began to push them toward greater political organization. Around the 9th century BCE, Phoenician traders from the eastern Mediterranean established trading posts along the North African coast. One of the most significant of these settlements was Carthage, located in present-day Tunisia. Over time, Carthage grew into a powerful maritime empire, controlling trade routes across the western Mediterranean. Coastal regions of modern Algeria became economically connected to this expanding Phoenician world. The relationship between the Amazigh tribes and Carthage was complex. At times they traded peacefully, exchanging agricultural products, livestock, and local goods for Mediterranean items, such as metals, pottery, and luxury products. At other times, they fought as rivals or served as mercenaries in Carthaginian armies. This interaction exposed the tribes of Algeria to new military strategies, political systems, and economic networks. It also set the stage for the emergence of the first major indigenous kingdoms in the region. By the 3rd century BCE, during the time of the Punic Wars between Carthage and Rome, two powerful Amazigh kingdoms had formed in North Africa: the Masili in the east and the Masaicili in the west, both occupying territories that include parts of present-day Algeria. These kingdoms were not merely loose tribal alliances. They had centralized leadership, organized cavalry forces, and diplomatic relationships with foreign powers. Their most famous ruler would become one of the most important figures in early Algerian history. Massinissa, originally a prince of the Masili, rose to prominence during the Second Punic War. At first allied with Carthage, he later shifted allegiance to Rome, recognizing the growing power of the Roman Republic. Through military skill and political calculation, Massinissa unified much of Numidia, the name given by the Romans to the Amazigh kingdom in the region. Under his rule in the 2nd century BCE, Numidia became a significant political force in North Africa. Massinissa's reign marked a turning point. He strengthened agriculture, encouraged settlement, and attempted to transition his people from primarily semi-nomadic lifestyles to more structured statehood. Ancient sources describe Numidia as increasingly prosperous, with expanding grain production that would later become crucial to the Roman Empire. The famous Numidian cavalry, known for speed and tactical flexibility, gained a reputation across the Mediterranean world. However, the rise of Numidia also brought it into the orbit of Rome. After Carthage was destroyed in 146 BCE, Rome became the dominant power in North Africa. Numidia remained technically independent for a time, but internal conflicts and Roman political interference gradually weakened its sovereignty. One of the most dramatic episodes of this era involved Jugurtha, Massinissa's grandson, who fought against Rome in the Jugurthine War from 112 to 105 BCE. Jugurtha initially resisted Roman influence with determination and skill, even exploiting corruption within the Roman Senate. But Rome's military strength ultimately prevailed, and Jugurtha was captured and executed. His defeat symbolized the growing dominance of Rome over the region. By the 1st century BCE, much of northern Algeria had been incorporated into the Roman Empire. Yet even as Rome extended its authority, Amazigh tribal identity did not disappear. Local leaders continued to play roles within the Roman system, and many indigenous traditions endured. Cities such as Timgad, Jamila, and Tipasa would later reflect Roman architectural influence, but the countryside remained deeply rooted in Amazigh culture. The tribal era of Algeria was therefore not erased by foreign contact. Instead, it evolved. The interaction between indigenous Amazigh societies and Mediterranean empires created a layered identity shaped by resilience and adaptation. Tribal structures continued to influence social organization long after kingdoms fell and empires changed hands. Loyalty to clan, land, and lineage remained powerful forces in North African society. This period also established Algeria as a strategic crossroads. Positioned between Carthage and the Western Mediterranean, between the Sahara and the sea, it became a land that larger empires sought to control, but rarely fully transformed. Its people learned to negotiate, resist, and adapt to external powers while maintaining core elements of their identity. By the early centuries of the Common Era, Roman authority stretched across much of coastal Algeria, bringing roads, cities, and integration into imperial trade networks. Yet, beneath the Roman layer, the tribal foundations remained strong. These foundations would later shape how new religions spread, how resistance movements formed, and how cultural identity survived successive waves of influence. The era of ancient kingdoms and tribal power was not simply a chapter of early state formation. It was the moment when Algeria first appeared clearly in recorded history as a land of organized political authority, military skill, and cultural resilience. From Massinissa's unification of Numidia to Jugurtha's defiance of Rome, the region demonstrated both ambition and independence. As Roman influence deepened and new belief systems began moving across the Mediterranean, Algeria was about to enter another transformative phase. A new spiritual force would emerge, one that would reshape society, culture, and identity in ways that would endure for centuries. In the next chapter, we explore the religious and cultural formation of Algeria, tracing how faith, language, and tradition blended to create a unique North African civilization. As Roman rule expanded across the coastal regions of what is now Algeria, the land entered a new phase of transformation, one shaped not only by political authority, but by ideas, belief systems, and cultural exchange. Roads connected cities, markets thrived, and agriculture flourished, especially grain production that fed distant parts of the empire. Roman urban centers such as Timgad, Jamila, and Tipasa rose with stone forums, theaters, baths, and temples. Yet beneath these visible symbols of imperial power, deeper cultural currents were flowing. Algeria was not simply becoming Roman, it was becoming something layered, complex, and uniquely North African. Religion played a central role in this transformation. In the early centuries of Roman rule, traditional Amazigh spiritual practices continued alongside Roman polytheism. Indigenous communities honored local deities connected to nature, ancestors, and tribal identity. The Romans, pragmatic in governance, often allowed local religious customs to continue as long as imperial authority was respected. Over time, religious blending occurred. Indigenous gods were sometimes associated with Roman ones, creating syncretic forms of worship that reflected both traditions. Temples stood not only as places of ritual, but as symbols of cultural negotiation. Then in the first centuries of the Common Era, a new faith began to spread quietly across North Africa: Christianity. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Christian communities had formed in many Roman cities of the region. Algeria became one of the early centers of Christian thought in the Western Mediterranean. The city of Hippo Regius, located in present-day Annaba, would later become associated with one of the most influential theologians in Christian history, Augustine of Hippo. Born in 354 CE in the town of Tagaste, also in modern Algeria, Augustine's writings would shape Christian philosophy for centuries. His life reflected the complex cultural world of North Africa at the time. Educated in Roman traditions, influenced by local realities, and deeply engaged in theological debate. Christianity in North Africa was not uniform. It experienced internal divisions, such as the Donatist movement, which emerged in the 4th century during periods of persecution and political tension within the Roman Empire. The Donatists argued for a stricter standard of religious purity, creating deep religious divisions within local communities. These disputes were not merely theological. They reflected social and political tensions between different groups within North African society. Algeria, during this era, was a region where faith and identity were deeply intertwined. Meanwhile, beyond the cities and fertile coastal plains, Amazigh tribal life continued in the mountains and desert frontiers. Roman control was strongest in urban centers, but rural and highland areas often maintained greater autonomy. Over time, pressure on the Roman Empire increased from both internal instability and external threats. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was weakening, and North Africa faced new invasions. In 429 CE, the Vandals, a Germanic people who had crossed into North Africa from Spain, swept through the region and established a kingdom that included parts of present-day Algeria. Their rule disrupted Roman political structures. Though they maintained many administrative systems, the Vandals followed Arian Christianity, a branch of Christianity considered heretical by mainstream Roman Christians, which intensified religious tensions. Yet even under Vandal rule, local Amazigh groups continued to assert their autonomy in various regions. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire, centered in Constantinople, reconquered parts of North Africa, attempting to restore imperial authority. Byzantine rule reintroduced Orthodox Christian control in many cities, but it struggled to maintain long-term stability. Political fragmentation, economic strain, and ongoing tribal independence created a landscape that was increasingly decentralized. Algeria at this time was not a single unified entity, but a mosaic of cities, tribes, and shifting loyalties. Then in the 7th century, another profound transformation began. From the Arabian Peninsula, a new religious and political force was expanding rapidly: Islam. Following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, Muslim armies moved beyond Arabia into the Levant, Egypt, and eventually North Africa. By the mid to late 7th century, Islamic forces entered the Maghreb region. The spread of Islam into Algeria was not a single event, but a gradual process involving military campaigns, political alliances, and cultural exchange. Initial resistance occurred, particularly from Amazigh groups who defended their territories fiercely. One of the most famous figures associated with this resistance is Dihya, often referred to as Al-Kahina, a Berber queen who led opposition against early Arab expansion in the late 7th century. Her resistance symbolizes the determination of local communities to preserve autonomy. However, over time, Islam spread not only through conquest, but through integration. Many Amazigh tribes adopted Islam, finding within it a framework that could coexist with tribal identity and even empower local leadership. By the 8th century, Islam had become deeply rooted across much of Algeria. Arabic gradually spread as a language of religion, administration, and scholarship, though Amazigh languages continued to be spoken widely. The fusion of Amazigh cultural foundations with Islamic belief created a new civilizational identity in North Africa. This was not simply cultural replacement, it was synthesis. Tribal structures adapted to Islamic governance models. Religious scholars emerged. Trade networks expanded, linking Algeria more closely to the broader Islamic world, stretching from Spain to the Middle East. This religious transformation reshaped society profoundly. Islamic law influenced social organization. Mosques became centers of community life. Education expanded through religious study. Trans-Saharan trade routes flourished, connecting North Africa with West Africa, bringing gold, salt, and intellectual exchange. Algeria was no longer primarily defined by Roman cities or tribal confederations. It was becoming part of a vast Islamic civilization. Yet even as Islam unified much of the region spiritually, political authority remained diverse. Local dynasties would soon rise, blending Amazigh leadership with Islamic legitimacy. The foundations laid during this religious and cultural formation period prepared Algeria for the emergence of powerful medieval states. Identity in Algeria was now layered with prehistoric resilience, tribal heritage, Roman influence, Christian intellectual legacy, and Islamic faith. The land had been shaped by many currents, but it had not lost its core character. Instead, each era left an imprint, contributing to a complex and evolving identity. As we move forward into the medieval period, we will see how these foundations gave rise to dynasties, regional empires, and new centers of power that would shape Algeria for centuries to come. As Islam became firmly established across North Africa, the land that is now Algeria entered a dynamic medieval era defined by powerful dynasties, expanding trade networks, intellectual growth, and shifting political authority. The fusion of Amazigh tribal traditions with Islamic governance created new political structures that were neither purely Arab nor purely indigenous, but distinctly Maghrebi. Authority in this period did not rest on distant imperial capitals alone. It often emerged from within North Africa itself. In the 8th century, only decades after the arrival of Islam, local Amazigh communities played a decisive role in shaping the political future of the region. Some groups embraced forms of Islam that emphasized equality and resistance to distant centralized control. This led to the rise of independent Islamic states in the Maghreb. Among the earliest was the Rustamid dynasty, founded in 777 CE, with its capital at Tahert in present-day western Algeria. The Rustamids established a prosperous and relatively tolerant state that became a center of trade and scholarship. Positioned along trans-Saharan trade routes, Tahert connected North Africa with sub-Saharan Africa, facilitating the exchange of gold, salt, textiles, and ideas. Merchants, scholars, and travelers passed through its markets, making it a cosmopolitan city of its time. The Rustamid state reflected a broader pattern in medieval Algeria: regional autonomy combined with participation in wider Islamic civilization. While eastern North Africa was influenced by powerful dynasties such as the Fatimids, western and central regions developed their own political identities. Over time, new Amazigh-led movements would rise with even greater ambition. In the 11th century, a reformist movement emerged from the Sahara among the Sanhaja Amazigh tribes. Known as the Almoravids, this movement combined religious revival with military strength. They sought to purify and strengthen Islamic practice while also expanding political control. From their desert origins, the Almoravids extended their authority across vast territories, including much of present-day Algeria, Morocco, and even into parts of Spain. Under their rule, cities flourished and trade expanded further. The Almoravids reinforced connections between North Africa and Al-Andalus, the Muslim-ruled regions of the Iberian Peninsula, creating a shared cultural and economic sphere across the Western Mediterranean. Following them in the 12th century came another powerful Amazigh-led dynasty, the Almohads. Originating from the Atlas Mountains, the Almohads challenged the Almoravids and eventually replaced them. Their rule marked one of the most influential periods in medieval North African history. The Almohads unified large portions of North Africa and Al-Andalus under centralized authority. They promoted architectural development, scholarship, and urban growth. Though their primary political centers were in Morocco and Spain, their influence deeply shaped Algeria. Cities within Algerian territory became integrated into a broader imperial system that connected trade, governance, and culture across regions. As the Almohad Empire declined in the 13th century, political fragmentation returned. In Algeria, the Zayyanid dynasty, also known as the Kingdom of Tlemcen, rose to prominence. Founded in 1235, the Zayyanid state controlled western Algeria and established Tlemcen as a major cultural and commercial center. Tlemcen became known for its scholars, artisans, and vibrant trade networks. Positioned between Morocco and Ifriqiya, it often had to navigate rivalries with neighboring powers, balancing diplomacy and defense. Despite political pressures, Tlemcen thrived as a center of Islamic learning and architecture. Mosques, madrasas, and palaces reflected a blend of Amazigh, Andalusian, and broader Islamic artistic traditions. Throughout this medieval period, Algeria was shaped not only by dynasties, but by commerce. Trans-Saharan trade routes intensified, linking Mediterranean ports with West African kingdoms such as Mali. Gold from West Africa flowed northward, while North African goods and ideas traveled south. Caravan cities in the Sahara became critical nodes in this exchange. Algeria's geographic position made it both a gateway and a crossroads. Its coastal cities connected it to Mediterranean maritime trade, while its southern regions tied it to the African interior. Culturally, this era saw the consolidation of Islamic identity across Algeria, but Amazigh language and traditions remained deeply rooted. Arabic became the language of religion, administration, and scholarship, yet Amazigh dialects continued to be spoken widely in rural and mountainous areas. Islamic jurisprudence schools developed influence, shaping social norms and governance. Sufi brotherhoods also spread during this period, emphasizing spiritual devotion and community cohesion. These religious networks would later play important roles in resistance movements and social organization. The medieval period in Algeria was therefore not a time of isolation, but of integration into wider worlds. It was connected to Al-Andalus in Spain, to Cairo and the Eastern Islamic lands, and to sub-Saharan Africa. Political authority shifted between dynasties, but cultural continuity endured. Architecture flourished, trade expanded, and scholarship deepened. Yet this period was also marked by rivalry and conflict. Competing states vied for control, and external pressures from Christian kingdoms in Iberia gradually altered Mediterranean dynamics. By the late 15th century, a major geopolitical shift occurred with the fall of Granada in 1492, ending Muslim rule in Spain. This event sent waves across North Africa. Refugees, including scholars and artisans, crossed into the Maghreb, bringing skills and traditions that enriched cities like Tlemcen and Algiers. At the same time, European maritime powers were expanding aggressively into the Mediterranean. Spain established fortified positions along parts of the North African coast, threatening local autonomy and trade. Algeria now faced a new era of external pressure. The medieval dynasties that had once projected power across regions were weakening. Coastal cities needed protection against growing European naval forces. This vulnerability would open the door to another major transformation in Algerian history, one that would link the region to a rising empire from the east. As medieval political structures declined and European expansion intensified, Algeria was about to enter the era of Ottoman influence, maritime conflict, and shifting imperial power. The foundations built during centuries of dynastic rule, trade, and cultural synthesis would shape how the region responded to this new challenge. In the next chapter, we move into the age of imperial expansion and foreign domination, where Algeria would become a key battleground in the struggle for control of the Mediterranean. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the balance of power in the Mediterranean had shifted dramatically. The fall of Granada in 1492 marked the end of Muslim rule in Iberia, and Spain emerged as an aggressive maritime power determined to secure its dominance. Spanish forces began capturing and fortifying key coastal points in North Africa, including positions along the Algerian shoreline. For the cities of the Maghreb, this was not merely a distant political development. It was an immediate threat. Coastal communities faced raids, blockades, and the possibility of direct foreign control. Algeria, positioned at the center of the Western Mediterranean, became a strategic prize in a growing contest between European kingdoms and rising Islamic empires. Amid this uncertainty, local leaders in Algiers sought protection from a new power expanding from the east, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans, who had captured Constantinople in 1453 and steadily extended their influence across southeastern Europe and the Middle East, were becoming one of the most formidable empires of the early modern world. In the early 16th century, two brothers known in European sources as the Barbarossa brothers, Arouj and Khair al-Din, arrived in North Africa. Originally privateers operating in the Mediterranean, they aligned themselves with the Ottomans and offered military assistance to local rulers resisting Spanish expansion. Arouj Barbarossa helped expel Spanish forces from parts of the Algerian coast and established control in Algiers. After his death in battle, his brother Khair al-Din consolidated authority and formally placed Algiers under Ottoman protection in 1518. This decision transformed Algeria's political trajectory. It became an Ottoman regency, governed by officials loyal to the Sultan in Istanbul, but exercising significant local autonomy. Over time, Algiers developed into a powerful maritime center, known throughout Europe for its naval strength. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Regency of Algiers emerged as a major player in Mediterranean affairs. Its fleet, composed of corsairs, engaged in naval warfare and privateering against European ships. From the Ottoman perspective, these activities were part of broader imperial conflict with Spain and other Christian powers. From the European perspective, Algiers gained a reputation as a base of piracy. The reality was complex. Privateering was a common practice across Mediterranean powers during this era, used as a tool of both warfare and economic strategy. Algiers benefited economically from maritime activity, ransom negotiations, and trade networks that extended across the region. Internally, the Ottoman Regency developed a distinctive political system. Although nominally under Ottoman sovereignty, local leaders known as DIs gradually gained substantial authority. The Janissaries, elite Ottoman troops stationed in Algiers, played a powerful political role. Over time, governance evolved into a semi-autonomous structure where local elites balanced loyalty to Istanbul with practical independence. The regency was divided into provinces governed by beys, extending authority into inland regions such as Oran, Constantine, and the Titeri area. However, control over remote tribal regions remained negotiated rather than absolute, reflecting the enduring strength of local Amazigh and Arab communities. Economically, Algeria during this period was not solely dependent on maritime activity. Agriculture remained vital, particularly grain production in fertile coastal plains. Trade routes linked the interior with ports, and trans-Saharan commerce continued to connect North Africa with sub-Saharan regions. Urban centers such as Algiers, Constantine, and Tlemcen maintained cultural and intellectual life. Mosques, religious schools, and markets formed the heart of city society. Islamic scholarship and Sufi brotherhoods continued to influence social cohesion. Yet external pressure did not disappear. European powers periodically launched military expeditions against Algiers, seeking to curb corsair activity and assert dominance. Some campaigns temporarily captured coastal cities, But long-term occupation proved difficult. The regency endured for centuries, adapting to shifting geopolitical realities. By the 18th century, however, the global balance of power was changing once again. European states were entering an era of industrial and military transformation, while the Ottoman Empire faced internal challenges and gradual decline. In 1830, a decisive turning point arrived. Following a diplomatic dispute known as the Fly-Whisk Incident between the Dey of Algiers and the French consul, France launched a military invasion. What began as a punitive expedition quickly turned into a full-scale conquest. French forces captured Algiers in July 1830, ending more than 3 centuries of Ottoman-aligned rule. Unlike previous European incursions, this invasion did not withdraw. France intended permanent control. The French conquest of Algeria marked the beginning of a new and far more intrusive form of colonial expansion. Unlike the Ottoman period, which had integrated Algeria into a broader Islamic imperial framework while preserving significant local autonomy, French colonialism aimed at restructuring land ownership, governance, and demographic patterns. Large numbers of European settlers, known as colons or pieds noirs, migrated to Algeria. Indigenous land was confiscated and redistributed. Administrative systems were redesigned to serve colonial interests. Resistance began almost immediately. In the 1830s and 1840s, Emir Abdelkader emerged as a central figure in organized opposition to French expansion. A religious and military leader, Abdelkader united various tribes and established a state structure in western Algeria, combining Islamic governance with disciplined military resistance. For more than a decade, he challenged French forces with remarkable effectiveness. Although ultimately defeated in 1847, Abdelkader became a symbol of Algerian resilience and national dignity. French control expanded steadily through the 19th century, often through brutal campaigns aimed at suppressing uprisings and securing territory. Infrastructure such as railways and ports developed, but primarily to serve colonial extraction and settler interests. Indigenous populations faced legal inequality under the Code de l'Indigénat, which imposed discriminatory laws. Economic disparities deepened and social tensions intensified. By the early 20th century, Algeria was considered legally part of France, rather than merely a colony, divided into administrative departments. Yet political representation remained unequal. Indigenous Algerians demanded greater rights, reforms, and recognition. Movements for reform and autonomy grew gradually, shaped by both local grievances and global currents of anti-colonial thought. The era of expansion and colonization transformed Algeria more profoundly than any previous period of foreign influence. It altered land distribution, urban demographics, and social hierarchies. It introduced modern infrastructure while creating systemic inequality. It embedded Algeria within the political and economic framework of a European power in ways that would have lasting consequences. As the 20th century unfolded, tensions between colonial authority and growing nationalist sentiment intensified. Global events, including 2 world wars, reshaped political consciousness. Algerian soldiers fought in European conflicts, yet returned home to limited rights and persistent inequality. The stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine Algeria entirely. In the next chapter, we move into the era of crisis, war, and revolution, when decades of tension would erupt into one of the most significant independence struggles of the 20th century. By the mid-20th century, Algeria stood at a breaking point. More than a century of French colonial rule had reshaped its cities, economy, and land ownership, but it had not erased the deep desire for dignity, equality, and self-determination among the Algerian people. Generations had grown up under a system where European settlers enjoyed full political rights, while the Muslim majority faced legal discrimination and economic marginalization. Infrastructure had expanded, ports had modernized, and agricultural exports had increased. Yet wealth and power remained unevenly distributed. Beneath the surface of apparent stability, frustration was building. The turning point came in the aftermath of World War II. Thousands of Algerians had fought in the French army, contributing to the defeat of Nazi Germany. Many hoped that their sacrifice would lead to meaningful political reform at home. Instead, tensions escalated. On May 8, 1945, as Europe celebrated victory, demonstrations broke out in several Algerian towns, including Sétif and Guelma, calling for greater rights and national recognition. Violence erupted, leading to attacks and a harsh crackdown by French authorities. The repression that followed resulted in significant loss of life and left a lasting scar on collective memory. For many Algerians, the events of 1945 shattered hopes that equality could be achieved within the existing colonial framework. Throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s, nationalist movements intensified. Political groups debated strategies, ranging from reform within the French system to full independence. Among these movements, a new organization began to take shape, the Front de Libération Nationale, or FLN. Its members concluded that armed struggle was the only path left. On November 1, 1954, coordinated attacks across Algeria marked the beginning of what would become the Algerian War of Independence. The conflict that followed was complex and deeply painful. It was not a conventional war between two clearly separated armies, but a struggle that unfolded in cities, villages, mountains, and deserts. The FLN organized guerrilla campaigns, seeking to mobilize rural populations and draw international attention to the cause of independence. French authorities responded with large-scale military deployments. At its height, hundreds of thousands of French troops were stationed in Algeria. The war involved counterinsurgency operations, intelligence campaigns, and fierce urban fighting, particularly during the Battle of Algiers in 1957, when violence and security measures intensified within the capital. The human cost was immense. Civilians were caught between opposing forces, communities were displaced, families were divided by political loyalties. The conflict also resonated beyond Algeria's borders. It became a global issue during the era of decolonization, drawing attention from newly independent nations, the United Nations, and major world powers. Algeria's struggle was increasingly viewed as part of a broader wave of anti-colonial movements across Africa and Asia. Within France itself, the war sparked deep political divisions. Public debate grew over the moral, political, and economic consequences of continued conflict. By the late 1950s, the crisis contributed to the collapse of the French Fourth Republic and the rise of Charles de Gaulle under the Fifth Republic. Although de Gaulle initially sought to maintain French Algeria, changing realities on the ground and growing international pressure shifted the trajectory toward negotiation. After years of intense conflict, negotiations between French representatives and the FLN culminated in the Evian Accords, signed on March 18, 1962. The agreement established a ceasefire and set the stage for a referendum on self-determination. On July 1, 1962, an overwhelming majority voted in favor of independence. On July 5, 1962, Algeria officially became an independent nation. Independence, however, did not erase the trauma of war. The departure of nearly 1 million European settlers, along with complex questions surrounding those who had supported French rule, created immediate social and economic challenges. Infrastructure needed rebuilding, institutions required formation, and a unified national vision had to be shaped from a society marked by years of conflict. Yet independence also brought a powerful sense of achievement. Algeria had reclaimed sovereignty after one of the 20th century's most significant liberation struggles. The war left a lasting imprint on national identity. The memory of resistance, sacrifice, and collective mobilization became central to Algeria's political culture. Leaders who had participated in the independence movement now faced the task of transforming revolutionary legitimacy into stable governance. The challenge ahead was enormous: to build a modern state capable of meeting the needs of its people while preserving the spirit that had driven the struggle. As Algeria stepped into independence, it entered a new era filled with hope, uncertainty, and ambition. The revolution had ended colonial rule, but the work of nation-building was only beginning. In the next chapter, we explore how Algeria navigated the complexities of modern state formation, balancing ideology, economic development, and political change in the decades that followed independence. When Algeria gained independence in 1962, it did not inherit a ready-made state. It inherited the aftermath of a long and devastating war, a disrupted economy, and a society carrying both pride and trauma. The revolution had united diverse regions and communities under the banner of liberation, but transforming that unity into stable governance would prove to be one of the greatest challenges in modern Algerian history. The question was no longer how to win freedom, but how to build a nation. In the immediate years after independence, the Front de Libération Nationale, the FLN, became the dominant political force. Having led the struggle against colonial rule, it transitioned into the governing party. Ahmed Ben Bella emerged as Algeria's first president in 1963. The new leadership sought to define Algeria as a sovereign, socialist-leaning state grounded in Arab and Islamic identity, while also acknowledging its Amazigh heritage. Land previously owned by European settlers was nationalized and redistributed. Major industries, particularly in energy and natural resources, were placed under state control. The government aimed to reduce economic inequality and assert independence not only politically, but economically. However, the transition was not smooth. Internal disagreements over leadership and direction surfaced quickly. In 1965, Defense Minister Houari Boumediene led a bloodless coup that removed Ben Bella from power. Boumediene would go on to shape Algeria's political structure for more than a decade. Under his leadership, the state strengthened centralized authority and expanded nationalization policies. One of the most significant decisions came in 1971 when Algeria nationalized its oil and gas industry. This move significantly increased state revenue and reinforced Algeria's control over its natural resources. Oil and gas became the backbone of the national economy. With increased revenue during the global energy boom of the 1970s, Algeria invested in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and industrial development. Universities expanded, literacy rates improved, and new urban projects reshaped major cities. Algeria also positioned itself as an influential voice in the non-aligned movement, aligning neither fully with Western nor Eastern blocs during the Cold War. It supported anti-colonial movements worldwide and became known for advocating solidarity among developing nations. Yet economic dependence on hydrocarbons also created structural vulnerabilities. When global oil prices declined in the 1980s, Algeria faced serious financial strain. Unemployment rose, especially among young people, and dissatisfaction with political restrictions increased. The one-party system limited open political competition, and economic challenges exposed underlying tensions. In October 1988, widespread protests erupted in several cities, reflecting frustration over economic hardship and limited political freedoms. The unrest prompted significant reforms. A new constitution in 1989 introduced multi-party politics and opened space for greater political participation. The early 1990s brought both hope and instability. In the first round of parliamentary elections in 1991, the Islamic Salvation Front, known as the FIS, won a strong lead. Fearing a radical shift in governance, the military intervened, cancelling the electoral process. This decision triggered a prolonged and painful period of internal conflict during the 1990s, often referred to as the Black Decade. Armed groups and security forces clashed in a violent struggle that deeply affected civilian populations. The decade left thousands dead and communities deeply scarred. It was a time of uncertainty, fear, and national introspection. By the early 2000s, efforts toward reconciliation and stabilization began to take shape. Policies aimed at restoring peace gradually reduced levels of violence. The government worked to rebuild confidence and restore economic growth, again relying heavily on energy revenues. Infrastructure projects resumed and public services expanded. Algeria reasserted itself as a key regional actor in North Africa, maintaining strategic importance due to its size, location, and energy resources. Modern state formation in Algeria was therefore marked by ambition, challenge, and adaptation. From revolutionary governance to centralized socialism, from economic expansion to crisis and reform, the country navigated complex transitions. Its political culture remained deeply influenced by the legacy of the independence struggle, where unity and sovereignty were paramount. At the same time, demographic growth and a young population brought new expectations for transparency, opportunity, and representation. Through these decades, Algeria continued to balance multiple layers of identity: Arab, Amazigh, Islamic, Mediterranean, and African. The state recognized Tamazight, the Amazigh language, as a national and later official language, reflecting growing acknowledgement of cultural diversity within a unified national framework. This recognition symbolized an ongoing effort to integrate historical depth into modern governance. The process of state building did not follow a straight line. It involved consolidation, reform, and sometimes painful correction. But through each phase, Algeria maintained its sovereignty and sought stability in a region often marked by turbulence. As the 21st century advanced, new generations emerged with different perspectives shaped not by colonial memory, but by global connectivity, economic aspirations, and social change. Algeria's modern state continues to evolve, influenced by both its revolutionary past and its contemporary realities. In the next chapter, we explore Algeria's present-day identity, examining how history, culture, politics, and youth shape the nation today as it navigates a rapidly changing world. Today, Algeria stands as a nation deeply shaped by its long and layered history, where prehistoric resilience, tribal foundations, imperial influence, colonial struggle, and revolutionary triumph converge to form a complex modern identity. Its population of over 40 million people reflects a rich blend of cultural and linguistic heritage, including Arab, Amazigh, and Mediterranean influences. While Arabic serves as the official language of government and public life, Tamazight, the language of the Amazigh people, is also recognized as an official language, symbolizing both historical continuity and contemporary inclusion. French remains widely used in education, business, and media, a reminder of the colonial era. Yet Algeria has increasingly emphasized forging its own national identity distinct from foreign influence. Religion continues to play a central role in Algerian society. Islam, introduced during the 7th century, provides not only spiritual guidance, but also shapes social norms, traditions, and community cohesion. At the same time, Algeria has worked to balance religious values with modern governance, education and law, creating a society that blends heritage with contemporary realities. Sufi traditions and local customs persist alongside more formal religious practice, reflecting the enduring influence of historical cultural layers. Economically, Algeria remains heavily dependent on its natural resources, particularly oil and natural gas, which fund much of the state's infrastructure and public services. Urban centers like Algiers, Oran and Constantine have expanded rapidly, serving as hubs for commerce, industry and culture. Rural areas continue to maintain agricultural traditions, particularly in fertile coastal plains and highland regions, linking present-day life to centuries of adaptation to the land. The economy is gradually diversifying, with efforts to promote renewable energy, technology and tourism, reflecting a desire to build a sustainable and resilient future. Culturally, Algeria today is vibrant and dynamic. Music, literature, cinema and visual arts draw on Amazigh, Arab, Mediterranean and African influences, producing unique forms of expression. Rai music, for example, has gained global recognition while maintaining its roots in local social commentary and storytelling. Festivals, traditional crafts, and oral histories continue to connect Algerians with their ancestral past, ensuring that modernity does not erase heritage, but instead builds upon it. Politically, Algeria has faced ongoing challenges in balancing governance, representation, and public participation. Protests and movements such as the Hirak in 2019 demonstrated the enduring desire among Algerians for transparency, accountability, and meaningful reform. These movements highlight a young, politically aware population that is deeply conscious of the country's historical struggles and committed to shaping its future. Algeria's youth, urbanized and globally connected, carry forward both the memory of independence and the aspirations of modern society, seeking opportunities while honoring the sacrifices of previous generations. Algeria's identity is also deeply regional and global. Its location on the southern Mediterranean positions it at the intersection of Europe, Africa, and the Arab world. This has fostered cross-cultural exchange, trade, and diplomacy throughout history, from ancient trade routes to contemporary economic and political partnerships. At the same time, Algeria retains a strong sense of sovereignty, emphasizing its right to determine its own path while engaging with the wider world. Environmental and geographic diversity continues to shape daily life. From the Mediterranean coast to the Sahara Desert, from fertile valleys to rugged mountains, Algeria's landscapes have historically influenced settlement patterns, culture, and economic activity. These geographic features remain central to national identity, connecting modern citizens with the enduring rhythms of land, climate, and human adaptation that have shaped the country for millennia. In sum, Algeria today is the product of countless layers of history, each leaving its mark on language, culture, governance, and social life. Its people carry the legacy of prehistoric resilience, Amazigh and Arab heritage, Roman and Islamic civilization, Ottoman administration, French colonization, and revolutionary struggle. The modern state navigates the challenges of economic diversification, political reform, and cultural preservation while remaining anchored in the values of independence, sovereignty, and identity. Algeria's story, from prehistoric origins to present-day realities, reflects not just survival, but adaptation, creativity, and the ongoing effort to define what it means to be Algerian in a rapidly changing world. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through Algeria's incredible history, from its earliest human inhabitants to the vibrant nation it is today. If you enjoyed this story and want us to continue exploring the rich histories of other countries, let us know in the comments. We're curious, which country should we uncover next? Whether it's somewhere in Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, or the Middle East, we'd love to bring their stories to life just like we did here. Until then, may your curiosity never fade, and may every story you discover remind you of the incredible diversity and resilience of humanity across the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this journey with fellow history lovers. See you in the next adventure.